can get started. So I will call the meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. We will go over a roll call. So as we know, Judy is not here. We're missing Stephanie and Sean. So there are 7 of us today for now. We'll see. And then we will move to the agenda approval. If you all have viewed the agenda for today, is there any discussion on it? Seeing none, we can move to a vote on the approval of the agenda. Can I entertain a motion?
So moved.
Okay, so moved by Bjorn. Any second? Seconded by Joffrey. And all those in favor of approving the agenda? All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes 7-0-0. And we can move forward with the approval of the minutes. If you all have taken a look, excuse me, the minutes from last week, if there is there any discussion or corrections? I'm sorry if you hear my cats fighting in the background.
You just hear the jingling of the bells.
Okay, okay, so no hissing. Seeing no discussion, we can vote on the approval of the minutes. And can I entertain a motion? Motion by Joffrey, and is there a second? Rehan seconds. All those in favor of approving the minutes for last week? Any abstentions? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes 7-0-0. And moving on to reports. I do not have any, so we can move forward with Joey and Lacey.
I do not have any reports.
The only report I have outside of what we have coming up is we're still waiting on one of our base funding units to make the updates as requested for the annual report, Central News Watch. We've reached out to them over the break and the start of the quarter, hadn't heard anything, but they got back to us yesterday. And so they are working on them to get them there. So hopefully we'll get those shortly so we can get the updates posted to the website. What they originally sent is on the website right now, but there were some corrections needed based on reviewing it. So that is all that I got.
Okay, thank you, Joey. And Joffrey, do you have any reports?
No report on my side. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on to other business with communications received. No communications received. And our first call to public comment. Seeing none. Checking the chat real quick. Okay, no, nothing in the chat. So we will move to new business, but I see no new business on the agenda. So we will move to old business on base funding adjustment for the Sarah Spurgeon Art Gallery and program reviews.
Yep, and so the base funding adjustment, this is from 2 weeks ago, shared with you kind of the request that Heather had put in. You all had asked if Heather could be here to answer some questions. As a reminder, this is a request to make a base funding adjustment. Again, it was the ladder that was acquired last spring and purchased. However, the budget part didn't hit the account until September. So that fell on the current fiscal year and the current funding cycle. And so really the request is to adjust the current base funding as a one-time adjustment for that expense. But otherwise, I'll open it up to Heather for any questions you all might have for her. Welcome, Heather.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have. It's a quiet group tonight.
Looks like Bjorn has a question.
Yeah, these ladders that had the purchase had to be deferred, they were to come out of the goods and services budget, I'm assuming, right?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, gotcha. Thank you.
Were there any other questions? I know a few of you asked if Heather could be here before we decide to make a motion or not. So any others? Otherwise, what would be open right now is for someone to make one of two options. Either make a motion to approve the base funding adjustment as requested, to deny it, or to table it for next week for voting. So one of three actions we need to take tonight. But make sure to get any questions to Heather first, because once the motion is made, then the discussion is only on that motion.
Go ahead, Bjorn.
Yeah, can you reiterate what happened with the ladders? Because I'm pretty sure I know, but I don't want to make any mistakes, so.
Oh, sure. And you might have talked about it 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had some ladders that we intended to purchase last fiscal year. It was last spring. And we got the ladders from Woods Ace Hardware, and we actually acquired the ladders. I think I wrote down some notes, and so we had the ladders in hand on June 14th, and we had a receipt from Woods Ace Hardware on June 14th, and so we had fully intended to purchase and pay for those last fiscal year, spring of 2021. However, we had a staff changeover in our department, and I think what happened is that the bill that pays for the Woods Ace Hardware account didn't actually get paid until September, and that my understanding is because of staff transitions. If that all makes sense. Yeah.
Lacey, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so just to kind of reiterate, after Heather came in, as far as the accounting goes, we are not able to move the expense back to that fiscal year because we closed the fiscal year already. And so we usually close in early August. So we would have missed that cutoff date in order to do that. So because of the accounting rules that we have and not being able to move the expense, the only way we can essentially correct it is if we were to allocate more money in this fiscal year than essentially fixing last year's budget. So hopefully that was just kind of a short recap of the accounting pieces of it all.
And Greg, you have your hand up.
Yeah. So I had two questions. I mean, one is what's the dollar amount we're talking about here? Because I think I've forgotten how much money we're asking to be allocated, and also your position. Are you off a certain time of year?
Oh yeah. Well, so the amount is just under $1,400. It was like $1,399.59. And yeah, I mean, you know, we initiated the purchase and we had the ladders and we had a receipt as of the middle of June, but then I go on cyclic leave. So I'm out all of July and August. And, you know, last spring, we were also mostly all online and we had a new staff person coming in. So I think there was just some kind of a mix up, you know, with the Woods Hardware bill and account that it didn't get paid until September. And, I can request that something be purchased, but in my position, I don't actually do the purchasing. That's usually our department secretary that does that. So. Thanks, Greg.
Bjorn?
Since the letters weren't able to be purchased until the next fiscal year, did y'all have the 1,400 odd? Was that spent during fiscal year last for something non-ladder related, or?
Oh yeah, well we still had money left over. The gallery still had money left over from FY21 from last year, and that's one of the reasons why we came to the committee to see if we could make an adjustment. Even though it's so late in the game.
Yeah. About how much did you have left over?
It was more than the $1,400. I'd have to look back, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you want, Bjorn, it's in the annual report that's on the website. I can pull it up in the background while we're talking. But I mean, the other part to add in here with that is if this had been known that it wasn't hitting until after the cutoff, this would have likely been a request last spring to carry forward that amount. But since the ladders were acquired in the spring, didn't know that the purchase part didn't hit until September due to that vacancy. So this is kind of the cleaning up administratively. It just needs to be requested through you all.
Go ahead, Joffrey.
Yeah, why couldn't you have used the money from last year to clear whatever the amount that was left?
Well, I think Lacey mentioned that by the time the ladder hit the books, it was September, and it was too late to use, I guess, a simple accounting fix to go back and fix it that way. So.
And Lacey?
Yeah, so to kind of reiterate, if this wouldn't have been the end of a funding cycle, we would have left the expense because that carry forward money would have offset that expense that happened in September. So really, the only reason we're actually seeing something like this is because of the fact that last year, all of the funding was wiped back to the S&A committee because it was the end of the funding cycle.
And just to add, to go back to answer Bjorn's question, the art gallery had just over $9,000 that was swept back at the end of the last base funding cycle.
Are there any more questions for Heather or any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I think we can move forward with the agenda, or?
Well, with this, we need someone to make one of the three motions to approve, deny, or table.
Right, Bjorn, you have your hand up.
Given that the expense or the delay was pretty much unforeseeable, and I mean, there's already money that came back. The only thing that I'm going to move to grant a one-time base funding allocation equivalent to the cost of the ladders to the art gallery.
And is there a second to Bjorn's motion? I see Rehan seconds. Now we'll go to voting. All those in favor. And could you repeat that again, Bjorn? I'm sorry. Your motion.
Oh yeah, the motion was that we grant them a grant the art gallery a one-time base funding adjustment of equivalent to the cost of the ladders.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay, any abstentions? And any opposed? Okay, and I believe motion passes. Is that 6-0 or 602?
Yes, 602.
My bad, everyone. Well, motion passes 602. And from there, I believe we can move forward to program reviews and finalizing the questions that we have, which Haley was kind enough to email everyone.
Yes, and so I'll jump in on that. So Haley sent those out today. If you all can take a look at them, we can make any fine tweaks. The part that I wanted you all to specifically look at is after jotting down all of the questions we had from last week and going back through the recording, there were questions 2, 3, and 4, and I put them all together because I put them down how we worded them. However, when you look at them, they all are very similar. And so the question I have is there a need to have these separated? And if so, then probably need to reword it. Or are these all roughly asking the same thing and we can condense them down into one? And so for the sake of, and again, I know you all have them sent to you electronically on the committee, but I'll just share them on here and the parts that are similar. So again, we're looking at on the program review questions, numbers 2, 3, and 4. And so question 2 is asking, how are you assessing the effectiveness of your program in achieving the targets that we asked them about? Question 3 is, how do you assess the effectiveness of the service activities you provided to students? And question 4 is, how do you assess your impact to the student experience here at CWU? And so my question to you all is there a need for those to be 3 separate questions that need to be further differentiated? Or are we really asking very similar things? Because to me, they all seem similar, but I went off of what our minutes and our recording had last week and put them all in here. They just seem, I think we're going to get redundant answers to those the way they're currently worded. So leave that open, or if there are other questions or suggestions on the wording that we have within there, but I wanted to start with those 3 that are very similar.
Bjorn, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I noticed that they came right after question 1, which was how does the program support CWU students? And I wondered if that would also be tied into the learning or operational objectives. 4 and 3 definitely seem kind of redundant because effectiveness is often tied hand in hand with impact to student experience. But I don't have strong feelings one way or the other.
I was feeling similar on that, Bjorn, is honestly with that. And I was going to leave it open, but if they were similar, I would say we keep question 1 and then question 2, since it asks what are your program goals or learning objectives, because we do need to ask that because everyone's are going to be different. And then how are you assessing the effectiveness? And then how does your program support CW students seem to be touching on the impact of the student experience for me as well. But in case I misinterpreted, or as we were talking, we verbalized it differently than what the intent was, I didn't want to make that executive decision. So otherwise, I think we can leave questions 1 and 2 and remove questions 3 and 4 if they're really tied up already in that. Otherwise, other questions on this? Any things you all want me to tweak or modify further with it?
On 3 and 4, it looks like it's the same, and so I would just take away question 4.
Any other edits or thoughts on this? Now, if you notice any grammatical or spelling things, you can send those to me separately. We don't need to go into that, but please do.
I just had a question that I think maybe Lacey would know. I'm not sure, but regarding like, I think it relates to question 11, but for starters, my question is like, will the budget be seen by these areas before we send these program review questions out?
Do you mean like the budget adjustments?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so Joseph, when are they going to be, when are we sending them out?
That's one of the pieces we're going to talk about. I mean, if we get them finalized, we would probably send them out by the end of this week. The question in terms of time frame for response would be where that would fit in. Now, keep in mind, these are going to be similar questions that we're going to give this year, next year, the year after. And so that question about the budget reductions may be more specific in future years. I can tell you all that all of the base funding units know about the approved recommendation that we put for the 5% this year and 10% next year. They may not see a reduction yet or an impact to their services for this year. I would anticipate for some of them, but they might. So that's a good question, but it's going to be up to us on when we send it out and when we want a response back. And I'll give recommendations on that in a minute.
And Lacey, you have something to add?
Yeah, so this is probably not the best way to answer this question, but essentially I would say the areas are going to be able to answer that question because there's a lot of areas that have already met that target. So as far as we're talking about, if we're talking about fiscal 22, which is this year, the financial adjustments have almost been completely made. And they are now working on the next year of adjustments. So we should be able to answer that. I would say there might be some questions for some areas, but I also think it's okay if they just let us know that there's maybe things pending too.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Great question, Lydia. Thank you.
I'm curious about question 12, and what's the goal of that question?
Were you going to answer, Bjorn, or did you have another question? Okay, so that one came up last week, Joffrey. That was one of the questions that we had asked to put in there. And I don't remember because I don't have the minutes in front of me which one of you asked to have that put in there. The intent behind it was really, are there circumstances or challenges that the committee needs to know? So beyond the reductions, is there, and so let's use your budget as an example, Joffrey, with CWU. Is there something the committee should know that has prevented you from spending the budget as you planned already? So we would know, looking like, why you have money remaining outside of these other pieces. So it gives them the opportunity to answer that question, and we have it on file. So again, as we're looking at each of the 4 years of the funding cycle, we can see what impacts their self-reporting that prevented them from spending their full budget as planned.
Bjorn, did you have something to add?
Oh, yeah. Question 5, what is the purpose of your program? I noticed a little bit of overlap with the above 4 questions, especially in what ways does your program support CWU students? I just can't think of an eventuality in which a program would have a purpose other than supporting CWU students. So those questions could potentially be combined, or they could be left. I mean, it would be worthwhile noting a program that wasn't primarily designed to support students.
Well, and I think with that, maybe there's a way to word it. Some of this purpose of your program is coming from work that we're doing on scope of practice. within the university. So specifically the purpose, ideally supporting students is a part of that, but you're going to get something more. So keep in mind how broad our base funded units are. And so ideally when we're talking like a unit, like let's say sub-engineering, for example, all of them are intended to support CW students, but they're going to have a more specific focus that goes further into that. And I don't know what engineering would say their purpose is, so I don't want to make one up, but it's going to be specific to supporting the operations, the functions of the student union building, on the technical aspects of the equipment and things like that, right? And so this is asking them to define their purpose and to see for us, are there programs we're funding who have an overlapping or dual purpose? And that's why that follow-up question, are there overlaps or intersections? So really, like, is there a duplication of services that we're seeing amongst these programs and services? Because then the committee can recommend or ask the questions, is there collaboration between your two units because you both gave the same exact answer? And so if there's a better way to word that, I know for some of the student success areas, they'll know what that means, but with some of the work we've done, but I don't know with the others.
I can't tell if it needs to be reworded or if I'm just a little out of it. I guess if it could be reworded, like what role does your program serve at the university? Something like that. Although I'm mostly making things up at the moment.
I mean, part of what I can reword it with that, and I'll throw out a suggestion in a second, but the other part is we can put it out, and if we look like we're getting the exact same answers because there's confusion, we can tweak it further. But it could be, what is the purpose of your, or what is the service provided by your program? Maybe that's a little more clear, is what is the service provided?
Isn't that pretty intuitive that, let's say, if it is a student government, they know it is for students, they provide service to students. I mean, the services would be pretty intuitive.
You would hope, Joffrey, some of these would be intuitive, but I think that's the part where we want to be clear. We're not making assumptions on what we think the service or purpose are versus what they are.
Go ahead, Bjorn.
Just basically an update with question 7. How does your program support the university's mission and goals? Since the goal statement still isn't iterated, I mean, I really like what you've done with like the S&A mission statement. Having that right in there is really helpful. Should we just leave that one until the mission and goals are finalized, or because it's I think they would know where to look for CWU mission and goals, but it's currently it's just not incredibly specific because it can't be.
I'm glad you brought that because I meant to mention that one. I jumped to questions 2, 3, and 4 and forgot 7. So 7, I didn't put it on there because right now we can put the mission statement in, and the goals are a series of goals that are quite a bit. I know the goal is to condense that into a more clear vision and mission statement, which then we can put once that's done. So that was a question for you all, is given that we don't have that more refined one, do we want to simply link to, and I can put a link to where the university's mission and goals are. It's quite a bit to copy in there, unlike question 6 with the S&A part taken out of the Killian and the statutory pieces. I was able to get a nice concise sentence out of those. There's not a nice concise sentence for the university mission and goals as they currently stand. So that should have a link to that spot on the website when we send it out. Other feedback or questions? Given that, I'll make the adjustments that we talked about tonight and refine those. Ideally, the plan would be that we would send these out probably by the end of the week to give some time frame. Now, knowing that we're looking at about, with the updates we had on here, 11 questions. Individuals are going to need time to fill this out. And I would say, I don't know what your all's thought process on time frame would be. I would not recommend less than a month, knowing everyone right now is going to be focusing on budget pieces and strategic planning for the university. That puts us in the middle of February. I don't know if we want to aim for by the end of February with a due date, because we'll get it back and then want to start looking and reviewing those. But thoughts on giving them really till the end of February to get these back to us, or something different?
I was under the impression that it would, I mean, a typical day or presentation would probably be the first Wednesday of March. That's my impression.
And we can aim for that, Joffrey. They're not going to come in and present, so they're going to submit these electronically to us with the update. So our meeting, if I'm looking on here, we have 2 meetings in March before we go to finals and spring break. So if we aim to have them to us, and this would be the benefit, if they get them by February 28th, that's the Monday, we then ideally should have them all collected and they can be sent out to you all on the committee by the meeting on March 2nd, which either gives us the 2nd or realistically probably the 9th. So you all have a chance to review them and look over them.
Bjorn?
Would this date that we're setting be the same for the next 2 years of this quadrennium, or would we be reevaluating it for those years?
We would likely, because we already have the questionnaire set, it would probably be one that, so our normal program review time frame is that it's the beginning of winter quarter that they come in and start doing program reviews. And so the normal time frame would probably be sometime at the start of this quarter, or by the start of the quarter, they would give us some feedback, unless the committee decided a different time frame on that. So this is just for this year that we're looking at when you all think would be feasible with this going out, and for you all to be able to look and review as well.
Go ahead, Bjorn.
You can tell I become more uncomfortable with talking because my voice gets higher in pitch. Y'all need to contribute, like talk. I'm getting nervous. But in terms of what, I'm sorry. What if we extended the due date to the end of spring, or no, not spring, the end of winter quarter, so that we wouldn't like start doing the reviews for those 2 weeks and then pause for spring break, and then we could have over spring break to review them. I don't know if there's, I mean, I've never done these before. I don't know if we'll have time to do all of them during spring quarter, but.
So we're not going to have people come in, so we would. This will be you all asking, and so I think that's a good idea, is to have it really by then. It gives Lacey and I the chance, if anyone doesn't get it by the due dates, to do the poking and prodding. So you all have them by the start of spring quarter. The real intent would be, once you get all of these, to have you all get a chance to look through them. We'll have them posted on the website, but to ideally go through and, for example, look and say, okay, in looking at this, we have questions for circuit counting. We would like circuit counting to come in to answer the questions, but it's only by invite if you all see concerns or questions that we would bring the units in. Otherwise, their program review would just be the physical responses to the questions at that point. So giving a spring quarter would definitely be enough time, unless you all decide you want to bring in pretty much every unit. I would anticipate we probably don't need to bring in a lot, but again, I haven't seen the answers to the questions yet. In an ideal world, their questions and answers are straightforward. There's no flags being raised, there's no concerns, and so we take it as it is and say thanks everyone for your time and effort on it. But spring quarter, us having it by the start of spring quarter would definitely be sufficient. And yes, we can send questions out via email. If it's a minor clarification, I would definitely say, hey, let's send that via email. If it's a, hey, we want, again, ASCWU to come in and answer more specifically, because this is a little more complex, or we're concerned about their response to this. Either option is open to us. And we'll discuss those as we're reviewing these spring quarter specifically on what's the best option. So it sounds like, oh, go ahead, Deanna, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna add that I agree with, or the recommendation that Bjorn gave for waiting till like the beginning of spring quarter to kind of review them.
Perfect. So that sounds good. Well, I'll put on there essentially to ask everyone to get these submitted back to us by the end of winter quarter. That gives really that last day. So that would give us a 2-week period of finals and spring break for Lacey and me to do any corralling and prodding that we need. So that way, when we come back for spring quarter, you all would have everything available. And it also gives me time to get them posted on the website beyond just emailing them out to you all. So awesome. Well, thank you all.
Thank you, Joey. So now we can move on to second call for public comment then. Oh, Joey.
This is probably should have been under my advisor report, but I forgot until just now. Next week, this will be a heads up. The only thing we really have on the docket next week, unless something else comes up, and unless I'm forgetting something, is really going to be reviewing and coming back to the ASCWU recommendations on the policy and the committee structure. And so this was from ASCWU last spring. And so I believe you all have said that we'll send it out again in advance, and then we'll have Joffrey provide any updates from the current ASCWU exec board on the same recommendation they had. And so that'll be coming up next week, just so you all know. I'll send out the piece from the last year's exec board, and then Joffrey can give the update for this one. Thanks in advance, Joffrey.
Any more to add for public comment? Seeing none, we can move to adjourn this meeting. And can I entertain a motion to adjourn today's meeting? Looks like Naif motioned, and I'll take Rehan as a second since his hand is still up, I believe. Yep. Okay. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting? All opposed? Any abstentions? I'm not sure if Andrea's hand is.
It was already up for approve. I think she's just left it up.
Okay.
I don't know how to take it off. I'm sorry.
No worries. All right, motion passes 800. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Have a great week, all. Thank you.